It's one of the biggest economic shifts of our time, and it's happening quietly. Britain, once the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, is now at real risk of losing even more of its manufacturing strength compared to other major countries. From 1870 to 1960, manufacturing played a key role in the development of the economy, undergirding success in other sectors of the economy and securing rising living standards. The subsequent 50 years from 1960 have witnessed a relative decline of the UK manufacturing sector relative to other sectors of the economy and relative to the manufacturing sectors in other countries. Factories that once defined entire towns are shuttered. This decline isn't just seen in numbers, it's visible across Britain's towns and cities. In the northeast, Sunderland was once known as the world's biggest shipbuilding town. Its shipyards were along the River Wear, used to employ thousands, but today they stand silent, leaving a huge gap in the city's identity and jobs. In Scotland, Glasgow's Clydebank once built 1 in every 5 ships in the world. Now, instead of the sound of hammers and engines, there's only the memory of its industrial power. The Midlands, once called the workshop of the world, faced a similar fate. Cities like Coventry and Birmingham, famous for car manufacturing and metalwork, saw major factories shut down, from the British Motor Corporation plant at Longbridge to many smaller workshops. These closures just didn't stop production, they broke the link to generations of skilled tradespeople. Many communities still feel that loss today. The empty factories that remain are reminders of a proud industrial era that has faded away. And the situation is becoming impossible to ignore. As some are warning, industry is collapsing all around us, and that is rapidly turning into a national emergency. In this video, we're going to analyse whether the situation truly amounts to a national emergency or if the phase is just hyperbole. Let's get started with the numbers. They're grim. Manufacturing output has fallen to multi-decade lows in several industries. The data paints a picture of a structural decline rather than temporary weakness. Car production, for example, has dropped by 35% in the past decade, reaching its lowest level in 73 years. According to the latest figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, the number of cars made in the UK fell by another 35% last month, hitting a 73-year low. The cyber attack that shut lines at Jaguar Land Rover triggered the latest fall, but it has been steadily declining for years now. Likewise, last month, the Mineral Productions Association reported that cement production had fallen to 1950s levels. The tyre manufacturer Pirelli last week said it was temporarily closing 2 tyre factories in Staffordshire and Cumbria. Funnily enough, it turns out that when you don't make any cars, you don't need many tyres either. At the end of September, Wedgwood suspended production at its factory for 90 days. The list goes on, with every week that passes, another couple of factories close their doors. And the situation is becoming impossible to ignore, even for the government. As some are warning, industry is collapsing all around us, and that is rapidly turning into a national emergency. This isn't just rhetoric. Even the government is being forced to act. The decline has reached such a point that it's now prompting direct intervention from Westminster. The UK's Parliament recently passed emergency legislation to allow the government to take control of the steelworks at Scunthorpe. This intervention was partly focused on protecting jobs and the local economy, but the underlying rationale was in line with a growing trend among governments to see economic and national security as intertwined. Put simply, Britain's industrial decline isn't just about the economy anymore. It's now seen as a national security issue. Steel, once a proud symbol of British strength, has become something the government must step in to save from collapse. As one report explained, the government has taken control of the UK's 3rd largest steelworks as ministers try to protect 1,450 jobs after Liberty Steel's operations in South Yorkshire were put into administration. These actions make one thing clear: the UK's manufacturing crisis has reached a critical point. Government bailouts and national takeovers, once seen as drastic measures, are becoming signs of just how fragile the country's industrial foundation has become. The UK now produces far less steel than its late 20th century peaks, reflecting a long-running structural decline in output. Entire communities that relied on these plants for generations are being hollowed out. The decline isn't limited to heavy industrial either. High-end manufacturing, the kind that Britain once prided itself on, is faltering too. Wedgwood Ceramics, an iconic brand that has survived wars, recessions, and global competition, has halted production in parts of its operations. Other firms are quietly following. In many parts of the country, the word factory now feels like a relic, a reminder of something that once was. The decline of British manufacturing isn't the fault of one policy or one political party. It's the result of decades of structural problems that both Labour and Conservative governments have failed to fix. Since the late 20th century, Britain has slowly shifted away from making things to focusing on services and finance. This change was driven by several long-standing issues. Factories moved overseas where production was cheaper, many workers lacked the skills needed for advanced manufacturing, and rising energy costs made it harder for UK industries to stay competitive. At the same time, investment in innovation, research and infrastructure constantly lagged behind other major economies. Both Labour and Conservative governments have tried to intervene at different points, from offering subsidies and rescue packages to promising industrial strategies, but none have managed to reverse the overall trend. What's happened is bigger than any single movement. It reflects a national economic direction that has been moving away from industry for more than 50 years. One of the biggest challenges facing British manufacturers today is the high cost of energy. British manufacturers are paying some of the highest industrial energy costs in the world. As a result, many British manufacturers can no longer compete effectively. As one report highlighted, UK manufacturers are now paying industrial energy prices that are twice those in France and 4 times the US. UK industrial firms aren't competing on a level playing field, especially energy incentive ones. Paying twice as much as companies in France and 4 times as much as those in the US is a staggering disadvantage. UK industrial firms often pay around twice as much for electricity as French competitors, and at times several times more than American peers. That's not a small difference. That's the kind of gap that decides whether a company survives or shuts down. The UK's net zero policy is highly controversial, and Energy Secretary Ed Miliband has come under intense scrutiny for the speed and scale of his plans. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, is racing to move Britain towards an entirely clean energy system by 2030, necessitating a switch to energy sources that are quicker to construct than nuclear, such as wind and solar. Mr. Miliband has argued that breaking Britain's reliance on oil and gas will ultimately lower energy bills. However, Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader, and industrialist Sir Jim Ratcliffe have both blamed net zero policies for surging prices. Sir Jim, the INEOS boss, warned in January that Britain's chemicals industry was facing extinction because of high energy bills and the shift to net zero. After INEOS closed down a synthetic ethanol centre in Scotland because of carbon taxes and energy costs, Sir Jim said, "We are witnessing the extinction of one of our major industries as chemical manufacture has the life squeezed out of it." Factually, net zero has not reduced overall energy costs in the UK. If anything, it has increased them so far, despite costing the country billions of pounds every year. The UK is spending vast sums to fund renewable subsidies, upgrade grid infrastructure, and meet legally binding climate targets. These policy levies mean the UK pays some of the highest energy bills in the world and are simultaneously disadvantaging British industry and stiffening the efforts of households to transition to lower carbon heating systems, according to industry trade groups. Yet, despite this enormous financial commitment, energy bills for households and manufacturers remain high. In other words, the public is paying more, not less. Supporters of the policy often argue that once Britain completes its transition to renewable energy, when wind, solar, and other clean technologies dominate the grid, costs will eventually fall. In theory, renewable energy should become cheaper over time as technology improves and reliance on imported gas fades. But that remains a projection, not a reality. Right now, the opposite is happening. Energy prices have gone up, not down. Manufacturers are paying more for electricity and gas than ever before. According to industry data, UK industrial energy prices are among the highest in Europe, and many firms directly link that to net zero related costs, such as carbon taxes, renewable levies, and the expensive process of transitioning to green energy infrastructure. Even though generating renewable energy can be cheaper than using fossil fuels, the overall system costs are still very high. That's because the electricity grid needs constant balancing, backup power plants for when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, new storage systems, and expensive infrastructure upgrades. All these extra costs get added to energy bills, and both households and businesses end up paying for them. So while politicians promise a cleaner and cheaper energy future, the reality right now is very different. Prices are rising, factories are closing, and jobs are being lost. Many experts warn that these policies, although well-meaning, are being rolled out too quickly for the current energy system to cope, creating serious financial pressure across the economy. The gap between political promises and the real economic impact is widening, and it's causing major controversy. This is why both Reform UK and the Conservative Party have said they want to scrap the UK's net zero policy. They argue that it's damaging British industry, pushing up energy prices and speeding up the decline of manufacturing across the country. Ms Badenoch said the UK's goal to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 is impossible and risks bankrupting the country. Our success at reducing emissions has also come at a significant cost, the highest electricity bills in the developed world. Brian Gilvary, chairman of INEOS Energy, put it bluntly: "We have stopped investing in Britain. Our future investment will not be in the UK. There's no question of that." These are not words uttered lightly. They come after a series of setbacks for the company in the UK, including the closure of Grangemouth Oil Refinery in Scotland after more than 100 years of operation. That refinery was part of the backbone of UK energy supply, but INEOS concluded it could no longer operate profitably. The company has also warned that its adjacent olefins and polymers plant, which supplies hundreds of British manufacturers with essential materials, is under serious threat. Sir Jim Ratcliffe himself pointed to energy as a major reason for this retreat, stating that Britain's high energy prices, mostly caused by green levies, are making such plants impossible to run profitably. The chemical industry is in crisis. Take this clip from Sky News, which illustrates just how sharply the sector has declined.
Have a look at this, in particular, the chemical sector, so an area that's been really affected by those higher energy costs. Look at what's happened to chemicals. Just in the last 2 years, look at that line. Down basically, that's actually down by 20% compared with only back in 2022, so kind of two and a half, 3 years ago.
Brian Gilvary highlighted the second pillar of the problem. He stated, "The problem is that the UK has become one of the most unstable fiscal regimes in the world from a perspective of natural resources and energy. It means we cannot invest with any clarity because we can't be sure what future tax rates will be." These quotes give us the core reasons as to why INEOS will no longer be investing in the UK: crippling energy costs and unstable tax regime. Then there's the problem of planning. Building and expanding a factory in the UK has become painfully slow and overcomplicated. Companies face layers of bureaucracy, endless forms, local objections, environmental reviews, and years of waiting for approval. By the time a project is finally given the green light, foreign competitors have already built their plants, hired workers, and started exporting. It's no surprise that many multinational firms are choosing to invest elsewhere. The United States is offering huge subsidies through its Inflation Reduction Act, and the European Union is doing the same with its Green Industrial Plan. Meanwhile, the UK is still caught up in debates about taxes and regulations as its industrial base continues to shrink. Add it all up, and the UK has become an impossible place to make anything. Factories that survived a couple of world wars, the inflationary turmoil of the 1970s and the Thatcher reforms of the 1980s are finally giving up. Critics of the current government believe that right now the Labour government does not seem in the least bit interested in the catastrophe. Sure, it came up with an industrial strategy over the summer that set out a handful of priorities, and there is some belated recognition that the soaring cost of energy is a problem, even if no one has managed to convince the Climate Change Secretary Ed Miliband. But there is no sense of urgency or any sign it is a priority. That is going to prove a huge mistake. Once factories close down, we should not kid ourselves that they are ever going to reopen. The skilled workforce will have moved on to other jobs or else taken early retirement. Likewise, once market share is sacrificed, we shouldn't expect it to ever be clawed back again. Manufacturing is a fiercely competitive global industry, with Chinese companies taking more and more of the market and rising countries such as Vietnam or India expanding rapidly all the time. The US behind its new tariff wall is turning itself into a manufacturing nation again. There will be plenty of foreign rivals stepping into every market that British companies are forced out of. By the time we get around to lowering our energy costs or cutting some of the carbon levies, it will be too late. The industry base will be lost forever. All we get right now are short-term half-baked measures. Half the steel industry has already been taken into effective state control and will be kept alive with subsidies at least for a year or two. The auto manufacturers have been offered loans, although it is a mystery how they will ever be paid back. It's important to remember that the UK was once known as the workshop of the world, the place where the Industrial Revolution began. Britain led the world in using coal, steam and iron to build ships, engines and machines that powered global trade. But 200 years later, things have completely changed. Today, the UK imports most of the manufactured goods it uses, and the roles have reversed. Instead of exporting innovation, Britain now buys the results of other countries' progress. The decline of manufacturing isn't happening in isolation. It's cascading across the economy. When domestic production falls, imports rise. That widens the trade deficit. The UK now imports roughly 61% of all its manufactured goods, but that dependency comes with risk. Global supply chains are fragile, as the pandemic proved. A single disruption, war, tariffs, or shipping bottlenecks can paralyze entire sectors. This dependency also weakens the pound. More imports mean more outflows, putting pressure on the currency and inflation. In that turn, forces the Bank of England to keep interest rates higher, which hurts investment. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. Deindustrialization feeds inflation, and inflation discourages reindustrialization. And let's not forget national security. Without a robust manufacturing base, the UK becomes dependent on other nations not just for goods, but for critical infrastructure, from semiconductors to steel for military vehicles. Strategic autonomy becomes a slogan rather than a reality. The United States is using the Inflation Reduction Act to pull in global manufacturers with huge tax breaks and subsidies worth hundreds of billions. The European Union is doing something similar through its Green Industrial Plan, creating fierce competition for industrial investment. Meanwhile, the UK is falling behind, weighed down by high energy costs, limited government spending power, and a lack of strong political action. Even fast-growing countries like India and Vietnam are moving ahead, taking advantage of cheaper energy and new global supply chain opportunities. Britain's industries, by contrast, urgently need more support to stay competitive. Can it be reversed? It's not too late, but it is close. Reversing Britain's deindustrialisation would require bold, urgent action. That means reforming the energy market to duplicate electricity from gas prices, cutting industrial levies, and providing targeted relief for energy-intensive sectors. It means rebuilding a long-term industrial strategy that transcends political cycles. And it means treating manufacturing not as a nostalgic relic, but as a national security priority. The UK could follow example of Germany's Mittelstand, supporting small and medium-sized manufacturers that form the backbone of their economy. It could leverage its renewable potential to generate genuinely cheap green energy. It could restore technical education and apprenticeships, giving young people a pathway back into skilled work. But all of this depends on one thing: political will. Without it, Britain will continue drifting toward a post-industrial future, not because it chose to, but because it failed to act. In conclusion, calling it a national emergency, as some are, might sound dramatic, but when you look at the facts, it's hard to argue otherwise. Car production has fallen to a 73-year low, and cement output has dropped back to the 1950s levels. These aren't signs of a temporary slowdown. They reveal a deep structural decline that's been unfolding for decades. Factories are closing, energy costs are soaring, and Britain's once world-leading industrial base is slipping further behind its global competitors. So what do you think? Is this truly a national emergency or just another stage in Britain's economic evolution? Let us know in the comments.